Welcome to the third part in the series of instructional videos designed to help players improve their ability at the game of Othello. This time round we're going to look at two things. Firstly, terminology relating to the pieces in play on the board, and then secondly we'll begin the first in a number of discussions involving mobility. So the first thing to do is set out this terminology that we'll use in discussion later on. Though it's not regarded as actual Othello terminology, the bunch is a phrase that I myself like to use to describe all the pieces in play on the board in a given turn. Secondly is the term empties. This is basically slang for the squares on the board that are yet to be played. Typically it's an expression used towards the end of the game when it's obvious to both players how many empty squares are left. So a player might say something like, "You had a winning position at 8 empties," implying that their opponent could still have won the game with 8 moves left to play. Next is a frontier disc. This is basically any piece that is adjacent to or touches an empty square, as shown here. Discs on the edge could fall under this category, but for the purposes of finding a frontier disc, pieces on the edge are not usually counted. Any other disc is known as an interior disc. Last time we set an aim for a player to reduce the number of pieces they have on the board, so that they could run their opponent out of good moves, and so force them to give up a corner. This relates directly to mobility. Now mobility is a general measure of the number of moves a player has, usually expressed as good if there are lots of moves available, and bad if there are a few moves available. So our basic aim is to decrease our opponent's mobility and increase our own mobility. Now, when we say increase our own mobility, this is actually a rather backward statement, because it's very hard for us to increase the number of moves that we have on the board as per the nature of the game. Each move a player makes will reduce the number of moves that they have available to them. So what we actually mean is to preserve our own mobility. For example, why take 2 pieces in a single turn when we can take 1 piece this turn and take the other piece the next turn? This is where, in my own eyes, the concept of mobility diverges slightly, because it's actually quite hard to be able to find moves that preserve your mobility and decrease your opponent's mobility at the same time. As a good Othello player, your aim is to decide which is the best to do in any particular move, as you will see is the case with many other concepts as we progress our understanding. So let's look firstly at reducing our opponent's mobility.